Evelyn Blackwood was the picture of composure, a CEO, philanthropist, and widow. Her younger sister, Marla, was the flame to her ice, an impulsive artist who never quite fit into the Blackwood legacy. After their father's death, Evelyn took command of the family's sprawling empire while Marla, who had long stayed away from the rigidity of legacy and boardrooms, returned home to grieve. Ravenwing Estate was sprawling, a mansion rooted in family memory. It had seen elegant galas, stormy confrontations, and now grief's quiet weight. Daniel, Evelyn's husband of 3 years, had slipped into the role of the estate's quiet sentinel, always calm, always present. He was a financial wizard, responsible for turning Blackwood Holdings into a modern powerhouse. Daniel welcomed Marla with sincerity. He asked about her exhibitions, her medium changes, her favorite postmodern sculptors. Evelyn had always loved Marla, but struggled to understand her world. Daniel, surprisingly, did not. The three developed a rhythm: breakfast in the sunroom, Evelyn with her black coffee and financial reports, Marla barefoot with paint under her nails, Daniel neatly dressed in wool slacks and always reading something from The Economist. Dinners were warm, conversations fluid. Marla had never felt so seen, yet so unsure. Daniel was kind, but sometimes his attention lingered too long. She brushed it off. Daniel had begun suggesting that Marla host her next art show under the Blackwood banner. Evelyn agreed, excited to merge business with passion. Marla hesitated. The offer felt generous but strategic. Still, she agreed. Autumn glazed the estate in fiery tones. Evelyn buried herself in corporate restructuring. Marla painted furiously. Daniel advised both, walking hallways with whispered phone calls and briefcase in hand. At night, Evelyn fell asleep to the muffled sound of Marla laughing with him downstairs. One night, Evelyn woke and couldn't find Daniel. She wandered barefoot through the halls. She found him in the library, reading in the dark. "You okay?" she asked. He smiled without warmth. "Couldn't sleep." She left with a weight in her chest she couldn't name. Thanksgiving arrived. The family, once fragmented, sat together over roast duck. Evelyn toasted her late father. Marla shared a story. Daniel leaned back, observing both women as if composing a portfolio. A month later, Marla's exhibit launched to great acclaim. Daniel was her biggest cheerleader. Evelyn applauded from the front row. The press coverage was excellent. Evelyn noted Daniel had prearranged most of the media invites. Efficient, supportive, strategic. And then one evening, Evelyn overheard a phone call. Daniel's voice low, purposeful. "No, she won't question it. She trusts me." A pause. Then laughter. The next day, she asked him directly, "Who were you talking to?" He didn't flinch. "Just one of the partners. About your expansion." Evelyn nodded, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Marla started retreating to the greenhouse. She painted there now, often until dawn. Evelyn caught her crying once, said nothing. They didn't speak about the tension. They let it fester quietly, like fog at the edges of a lake. Still, everything functioned. Blackwood Holdings hit record highs. Daniel was profiled in Forbes. Marla received a grant. Evelyn was honored at a gala. Perfect from the outside. But some vital thread was unraveling. Daniel began suggesting he and Marla collaborate on a modern gallery acquisition using Blackwood funds. Evelyn declined. He backed off, but the idea returned days later. Then again from Marla's lips. Evelyn smiled. "Where did you get that idea?" "I thought of it." "Are you sure?" Marla looked away. Winter came. Evelyn took long walks in the snow-laced gardens. Daniel stopped joining her. Marla barely emerged from the greenhouse. Evelyn finally opened her father's journals, something she had long put off. Inside were pages of notes, warning signs about Daniel before his death. Concerns he never voiced. "Too charming," one entry read. "Wants the throne, not the crown." It chilled her. She began checking the financials herself. Patterns emerged. Subtle, hidden, quiet misdirection. Investments routed through shadow entities. Names she didn't recognize. And Marla's art? Several pieces had been sold at inflated prices to anonymous buyers. Evelyn traced one back to a shell company Daniel had registered. Confrontation loomed. But first, clarity. She called in a private forensic accountant. And then waited. Trust had been the foundation. And now, Evelyn knew it would be the weapon. The days following Evelyn's discovery were a blur of whispered meetings and sleepless nights. The forensic accountant she had hired worked discreetly, combing through the vast Blackwood Holdings ledgers, while Evelyn watched the estate with eyes that had long since lost their softness. Every phone call Daniel made, every text message, was met with a cold calculation. Marla, meanwhile, grew more restless. Her once fiery passion for painting was tempered now by a shadow she refused to name. She spent hours locked in the greenhouse studio, surrounded by canvases darkened with raw emotion, twisted shapes and bleeding colors that seemed to scream silently. Evelyn noticed but said nothing, fearing that any confrontation might push her sister further away. One evening, Evelyn returned early from a business trip to New York. The house was eerily quiet. The only sound was the distant ticking of the grandfather clock. She found Marla at the greenhouse, staring at a canvas so violent and chaotic it made Evelyn's throat tighten. "You need to come out," Evelyn said gently. Marla didn't respond. "I'm worried about you," Evelyn confessed, stepping closer. Marla's eyes finally met hers, red-rimmed, distant. "You should be worried about him," she whispered. Evelyn's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Marla hesitated before saying, "Daniel's not who he says he is. I saw something that doesn't add up." That night, Evelyn lay awake. The house no longer felt like a sanctuary but a cage. She stared at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every smile, every tender gesture Daniel had made. Was it all a lie? The forensic accountant's report arrived weeks later, confirming her worst fears. Large sums were siphoned through dummy companies. Blackwood Holdings was bleeding money in ways that only Daniel could orchestrate. Yet, Daniel's explanations to the board had always seemed flawless, too flawless. Evelyn confronted Daniel at dinner one night. The dining room, normally bathed in the warm glow of candlelight, felt cold and sterile. "Daniel, I've seen the report," Evelyn said quietly. Daniel's face was unreadable, but his eyes flashed with something she didn't recognize. "This is a misunderstanding," he replied smoothly. "You don't understand the complexities of corporate restructuring." "I'm beginning to," Evelyn said firmly. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You're making accusations without proof." "I have proof," Evelyn said, placing the report on the table. Daniel reached out as if to take it, then pulled back. "This is nonsense." Marla, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "I told you something was wrong." Daniel's eyes snapped to her. "Marla, you don't know what you're saying." The sisters exchanged a look, one filled with unspoken alliance. Daniel excused himself, and the silence that followed was deafening. In the days that followed, Evelyn and Marla began their own investigations. They pored over documents, hacked into encrypted files, and even followed Daniel on a few late-night trips he thought were secret. What they found was a web of deception far more intricate than they had imagined. Links to offshore accounts, fake contracts, and shadowy business partners who seemed to exist only on paper. Yet, despite the evidence, Daniel maintained his charm in public, deflecting questions with practiced ease. One night, Marla confronted Daniel in the library, her voice trembling but fierce. "Why are you doing this?" Daniel looked at her coldly. "You don't understand the game, Marla. This is bigger than you or Evelyn. This is survival. By stealing from your family," she spat. He smiled, a sharp, predatory curl of his lips. "Family is a construct. Loyalty is earned, not given." That night, Marla's art changed again. She painted Daniel's face, but it was distorted, monstrous, a reflection of the betrayal she felt. Evelyn wrestled with the question of trust. How does one root out a serpent hiding in plain sight? Was her marriage a mistake? Was Daniel a calculated predator, or just a desperate man? The estate's walls seemed to close in, and every room whispered secrets. The sisters found themselves watching Daniel, their eyes sharp and unyielding, waiting for the moment when the mask would finally slip. And it did. The cold light of early morning filtered through the grand windows of Ravenwing Estate, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Evelyn sat at the edge of the sprawling mahogany desk in her late father's study, staring at the pile of documents spread before her. The numbers no longer made sense. They never would, not while Daniel was the one controlling them. Her fingers trembled as she traced a ledger entry. Millions diverted, accounts erased, forged signatures. The evidence was irrefutable. Daniel had been siphoning off the empire's wealth for months, maybe years. But the cruelest sting wasn't the financial betrayal. It was the way he had woven himself into their lives, hidden behind smiles, whispered promises, and midnight reassurances. Her phone buzzed softly, breaking the silence. Marla's name flashed on the screen. "We need to talk." Now, Evelyn inhaled, steeling herself, and answered. Marla was waiting in the greenhouse, the air thick with the smell of wet earth and turpentine. Her eyes, usually sharp and defiant, were swollen from tears. She held a bundle of papers, emails, photos, transaction records, all linking Daniel to a shadowy network of offshore accounts and fraudulent deals. He's been planning this for a long time, Marla said, voice low but fierce. This wasn't a mistake or desperation. It was cold, calculated. Evelyn nodded, feeling the weight of their shared pain. How did he do it? How did he fool us? Marla's hands shook. He used the family trust, the estate as collateral. When Dad died, Daniel moved fast. He bought silence and loyalty, bribed board members, manipulated contracts. And us, he played us like puppets. Evelyn clenched her jaw. We need proof. Hard proof. Together, they pored over every document, every suspicious signature. As the hours passed, a plan began to form, not just to expose Daniel, but to take back everything he had stolen. The pain of betrayal transformed into a cold, relentless resolve. Over the next days, the atmosphere at Ravenwing fractured. Daniel became erratic, paranoia creeping into his once flawless demeanor. Evelyn and Marla moved with surgical precision, gathering allies on the board, securing legal counsel, and preparing the company for a takeover to wrest control from Daniel's grasp. But Daniel wasn't idle. He retaliated, threats veiled as warnings, sabotage disguised as accidents. The estate became a battlefield. One evening, Marla discovered a hidden folder on Daniel's laptop, encrypted files containing personal correspondence and secret recordings. Among them, a chilling confession, Daniel admitting to orchestrating not just financial ruin, but plans to destroy Evelyn's reputation and fracture the family irreparably. Tears stung Marla's eyes as she realized the depth of the betrayal, not just of money, but of trust, love, and blood. The breaking point came unexpectedly. Daniel staged a gala under the guise of celebrating Blackwood Holdings' latest success. The estate filled with the city's elite, journalists, investors, friends. Under the glittering chandeliers, Daniel played the perfect host. But Evelyn and Marla had other plans. As the night unfolded, Evelyn took to the stage, her voice calm but resolute. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I must reveal the truth behind the mask. With the click of a remote, the giant screen behind her flickered to life. Emails, bank statements, videos, all painting Daniel not as a savior, but a villain. Gasps filled the room. Daniel's face twisted in fury and disbelief. Lies, he spat, stepping forward. Fabrications. But the damage was done. Legal teams moved in. Daniel was escorted out, arrested moments later. The aftermath was a storm. The media frenzy, the corporate investigations, the legal battles, it all threatened to tear Ravenwing apart. Yet, in the eye of the storm, Evelyn and Marla found something unexpected: solidarity. They confronted not just Daniel, but their own wounds, the fragile bonds of trust, the scars of deception. It was a painful reckoning. Late one night, Evelyn sat by the fireplace, the flickering flames reflecting in her weary eyes. Marla joined her, handing over a fresh canvas, a blank one. Start over, Marla said softly. Evelyn nodded, realizing that this was more than just business. It was about reclaiming their lives, their family, their future. The road ahead was uncertain, but they would walk it together, scarred but unbroken. The aftermath of Daniel's arrest left a hollow silence in the Ravenwing estate, but silence was a luxury Evelyn and Marla could no longer afford. The family empire was fractured, the trust shattered, and their lives forever altered. Yet, in the shards of betrayal, a new fire kindled, a cold, ruthless determination that neither sister could ignore. Evelyn sat alone in the study, her fingers tracing the rim of an empty glass. The walls of the room, once filled with warmth and history, now seemed suffocating, reminders of a past poisoned by deception. The betrayal was personal, but the consequences were public. Blackwood Holdings teetered on the brink of collapse, and every move had to be calculated with precision. She pulled out a ledger, her eyes sharp and scanning. The financial damage was staggering. Daniel had not only siphoned money, but had also left behind a web of false contracts, shell companies, and blackmail targets that threatened to drag the entire company into ruin. Across the hall, Marla sat in the greenhouse, surrounded by her dark, chaotic paintings. Her art had become a sanctuary, a place to vent the storm raging inside her. Yet even her passion had turned cold. The raw emotional energy of her work had shifted into something sharper, more deliberate. The sisters had talked little since Daniel's arrest. Words felt too fragile to carry the weight of their pain. But they shared a silent understanding. The time for mourning was over. Now they had to act. The plan was as clear as it was dangerous. Daniel's allies in the boardroom were still powerful, still maneuvering to protect their interests. The media painted Daniel as the lone villain, obscuring the complicity of those who had enabled him. If Evelyn and Marla wanted justice, they couldn't rely on courts or the press alone. They needed to strike at the heart of the conspiracy. It began with the gathering of allies, discreet meetings with trusted executives, lawyers, and private investigators. Evelyn's leadership, once seen as cold and detached, now took on a razor-sharp edge. She was no longer the grieving widow or the forgiving sister. She was a strategist, a commander rallying her forces for a battle that extended far beyond the walls of the estate. Marla, with her keen eye for details others missed, became the quiet architect behind the scenes. Her investigations uncovered hidden connections. Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, coded communications, and shell corporations with obscure names that masked the flow of stolen assets. One night, Marla called Evelyn into the greenhouse, holding a folder thick with documents. "This," she said, voice steady despite the storm inside, "is everything we've uncovered so far." Evelyn scanned the papers, noting names of board members, financial institutions, and law firms entangled in the web. "They're deeper than we thought," Evelyn murmured. "But we have them." The sisters devised a multi-layered approach. They would expose the corruption publicly, but on their terms. They planned to leverage the information to pressure the complicit board members into cooperation, turning their own greed against them. Meanwhile, they strengthened the company's defenses, tightening internal controls, auditing accounts, and shoring up financial reserves to survive the impending storm. Evelyn also began to rebuild her public image, appearing at charity events and business forums, projecting strength and resolve. Marla's art exhibitions, once niche and emotional, transformed into powerful statements, works that hinted at the darker truths behind the polished facade of wealth and power. Yet, the descent into this calculated vengeance came at a personal cost. The sisters' relationship, once filled with tentative hope, grew strained. The weight of the secret investigations and the looming confrontation gnawed at their bond. Evelyn's sleepless nights were haunted by memories of the past, while Marla's growing obsession with the darkness around them threatened to consume her. One evening, after a particularly tense board meeting, Evelyn found Marla in the attic, an old room they had rarely visited since their childhood. Marla was hunched over a canvas, her face a mask of concentration. "Why do you keep doing this to yourself?" Evelyn asked softly. Marla didn't look up. "Because if I stop, everything falls apart." Evelyn stepped closer, placing a hand on her sister's shoulder. "We're doing this together," she said. "We have to." Marla's eyes finally met hers, vulnerable but fierce. "I know," she whispered. "But sometimes I wonder if we've become what we're fighting against." The turning point came when Evelyn received an anonymous tip, a scheduled meeting between some of Daniel's former associates and an unknown buyer, rumored to be the key to unlocking the last of the stolen fortune. Under the cover of darkness, Evelyn and Marla prepared to intercept. Disguised and armed with the evidence they had gathered, they arrived at a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Inside, the tension was palpable. The meeting was a collision of shadows, furtive glances, whispered negotiations, and hands exchanging envelopes thick with cash and secrets. Evelyn's heart pounded as she recorded the interactions, her fingers trembling despite the adrenaline. But then a sudden movement, a hand reaching for a weapon. Chaos erupted. Underscore 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 underscore. What followed was a blur of sirens, shouting, and flashing lights. Evelyn and Marla barely escaped with their lives, but the evidence was secure. The fallout was immediate and devastating. The revelations from the warehouse raid shattered the remaining facade of Blackwood Holdings' leadership. Board members resigned, arrests were made, and the company began its slow climb back from the brink. Yet, even as justice seemed within reach, Evelyn and Marla knew the war was far from over. The descent into revenge had changed them. The path ahead was dark and uncertain, but they walked it with grim determination. In the quiet moments between battles, they clung to the hope that someday, the wounds of betrayal might heal. But for now, the fire of vengeance burned bright. The dawn broke cold and gray over Ravenwing Estate, but the chill in the air was nothing compared to the storm brewing inside the house. Months of planning, gathering evidence, and quietly turning allies into confidants had led to this pivotal moment. Evelyn sat in her office, staring at the thick dossier sprawled across her desk, the culmination of everything she and Marla had uncovered about Daniel and his corrupt web. Her fingers traced the edges of damning financial reports, recorded conversations, and secret correspondences. Each piece of evidence was another nail in Daniel's coffin. But this wasn't just about putting him behind bars. No, this was about reclaiming everything he had stolen, and more. The boardroom battle. The day's meeting was scheduled at the Grand Boardroom, where the company's most powerful figures gathered, some still loyal to Daniel, others waiting to see which way the wind would blow. Evelyn entered the room with a quiet confidence, but inside her heart pounded like a war drum. She scanned the faces, calculated smiles, thinly veiled hostility, and some open suspicion. Daniel's allies still hoped to maneuver him out quietly, to protect themselves and their own interests. But Evelyn was ready. She began by laying out the facts, proof of Daniel's financial crimes, manipulations, and threats. The room grew heavier with each revelation, the mask of professionalism slipping to reveal greed and fear. When she played the final recording, the one where Daniel coldly admits to orchestrating not just the theft of company assets, but plans to destroy her reputation and fracture the family, there was no denying the truth anymore. The room erupted in chaos. Some board members whispered accusations at one another. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Evelyn seized the moment. "This company needs new leadership," she said firmly. "I'm here to rebuild Blackwood Holdings, free of corruption and betrayal." A tense vote followed. The result was unanimous. Evelyn was reinstated as CEO. Daniel's last stand. But Daniel was not finished. As soon as he was notified of the board's decision, he unleashed a calculated counterattack. The media, hungry for scandal, became Daniel's weapon. Leaked evidence painted Evelyn as unstable, reckless, and vindictive. The press questioned her motives, scrutinized her past, and dredged up every minor imperfection. Social media campaigns spread rumors and false narratives. At shareholder meetings, Daniel's supporters voiced concern over Evelyn's leadership. It was a psychological war designed to break her. One evening, after a long day of meetings and damage control, Evelyn found herself alone in the darkened library. A faint noise echoed from the hallway. Her breath caught. Marla appeared silently, carrying a folder. "We found something," she whispered. Inside were documents revealing a new twist. Daniel had secretly allied with a powerful and dangerous figure, one who controlled significant political influence and could ruin Evelyn's life outside of business. The revelation hit Evelyn hard. Daniel's betrayal was more deeply rooted than she had imagined. The turning point, the public reveal. Evelyn and Marla realized that to defeat Daniel once and for all, they needed to take their fight public, but on their own terms. They organized a press conference in the estate's grand hall. Reporters and cameras filled the space, waiting for the story. Evelyn stepped up to the podium, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. "Today," she began, "I reveal the full extent of Daniel's betrayal, not only against my family and this company, but against the truth itself." She presented the evidence, documents, recordings, and photographs linking Daniel and his shadowy partner to corruption, bribery, and manipulation at the highest levels. The room buzzed with murmurs. Cameras flashed. The public was finally seeing the story from her perspective. The unexpected twist. Just when it seemed IEL's downfall was inevitable, the unexpected happened. The powerful figure Daniel allied with was none other than Evelyn's late father's closest friend and business partner, Victor Halloway. Victor, long believed to be a loyal family ally, had been silently manipulating the empire from behind the scenes. His involvement added a new layer of betrayal that cut deeper than Daniel's. Victor had secretly facilitated Daniel's schemes, funneling money and influence to secure his own power. His motivations were cold and calculated. He saw Evelyn as an obstacle to his vision for the company and was willing to destroy everything to get what he wanted. Confronting the ghosts. Evelyn faced Victor in a tense meeting, their history charged with decades of friendship and secrets. "You betrayed us," Evelyn said, voice sharp with anger. "Why?" Victor's eyes glinted with cruel satisfaction. Power isn't given, Evelyn. It's taken. Your father was weak. You're weak. I'm the future of Blackwood. But Evelyn wasn't broken. Not if I have anything to say about it. With this confrontation, Evelyn knew the battle was no longer just legal or financial. It was personal, psychological, and ruthless. The final move. Evelyn and Marla orchestrated a masterstroke. They leaked incriminating evidence of Victor's involvement to the press and the authorities, sparking investigations that rocked the city's elite. Simultaneously, they secured a major new investor, a respected figure known for turning around troubled companies, to back Blackwood Holdings, restoring faith and stabilizing the business. Victor's empire crumbled under public scrutiny, and he was forced to step down amid scandal. Justice and ruin. Daniel was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison, stripped of all assets. His trial became a spectacle, but his conviction was inevitable. Victor's downfall was equally swift, leaving a power vacuum and a legacy stained by betrayal. Evelyn and Marla stood amidst the wreckage, exhausted, wounded, but victorious. The aftermath. In the months that followed, Ravenwing Estate slowly began to heal. Evelyn, hardened by betrayal but tempered by resilience, rebuilt her family's legacy with new vision and strength. Marla's art blossomed, haunted but beautiful, reflecting the scars they bore and the battles they had won. Their bond, tested by fire, was stronger, rooted in shared pain and unbreakable resolve. Epilogue: Shadows and Light. One evening, as the sun set over the estate, Evelyn and Marla stood beneath the old oak tree. "We did what we had to," Evelyn said softly. Marla nodded. "But I wonder, was it worth it?" Evelyn looked out at the horizon, the shadows growing long. "Sometimes," she said, "justice is a blade that cuts both ways." And in the fading light, they both understood. Their lives would never be the same. The scars of betrayal and revenge would remain, but so would the strength they forged together. The estate felt like a mausoleum. Though Daniel was gone, locked away in a federal holding cell awaiting trial, the silence he left behind was not peace. It was eerie, smothering. Evelyn resumed her role in the company, but the board remained cautious. Some members whispered about her ruthlessness. Others admired her resolve. Her days were filled with strategy meetings and rebuilding the fractured legacy of Blackwood Holdings. Yet her nights were haunted by the memory of Daniel's voice. Marla withdrew from the public eye. Her art turned darker, canvases soaked in red and charcoal. The gallery owners whispered about her Daniel period, though none dared say it to her face. The paintings sold well, but Marla remained distant, watching from the shadows, her emotions no longer in the work but behind it. One night, Evelyn found her burning one of the paintings in the fireplace. "It wasn't honest," Marla said. "It was pain," Evelyn replied. "Then why does it still hurt?" The sisters grew closer in some ways, more estranged in others. Bound by trauma, they shared glances heavy with things unspoken. The attic remained untouched, a preserved memory of the war they waged together. Months passed. Daniel's trial began in the spring. The courtroom was a theater, but the conclusion was foregone. Evelyn testified. Marla refused to. Daniel never once looked at them. He was convicted on multiple counts of fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction. The sentence, 30 years without parole. It should have felt like closure. But Evelyn began waking up at night to phantom sounds, doors opening, footsteps in the hall. Security assured her nothing was wrong. Still, she installed more locks. Cameras. Marla started sleepwalking. Once, Evelyn found her at the edge of the Ravenwing treehouse, staring up. "He's not in prison," Marla whispered. "Not really. He's in us." Therapy helped a little. Time helped a little more. But some wounds didn't heal. They became part of the architecture of who they were. A year later, on the anniversary of their father's death, Evelyn and Marla stood together beneath the old oak. The treehouse still creaked above. "We did what we had to," Evelyn said. Marla nodded. "But we're not the same." "No," Evelyn agreed. "We're what's left." They stood in silence for a while. Then Marla turned to her sister. "You ever wonder if we went too far?" Evelyn's gaze didn't waver. Every day, the wind rustled the leaves. And for a moment, just a moment, they both thought they heard laughter. Sharp, familiar, and gone too fast to prove.